everybody here this morning. So Ralph called me late yesterday and he said, "I'm not going to be able to be there tomorrow. You're on." And I forgot to ask him at the time who had the invocation and pledge of allegiance.
He's going to get fired.
I'll tell you what. I know it's going
already.
Dennis, lead us in the invocation and pledge.
I found this, I thought it was appropriate from the events of last week, but please bow your heads. O Lord, whose will it is that all your people should dwell together in harmony, we give you thanks for the opportunities we find in Rotary to widen our circle of friendship and goodwill. We are grateful for our new friends whom we have come to know in this club and for the joys we have found in sharing our own friendship with others. Lead us daily to find new avenues of goodwill in our business and professional lives. Give us patience in dealing with those who are sharp and bitter. Give us creativity in finding ways to express ourselves, which will build better relationships. And Lord, give us a sense of humor that we may not take ourselves too seriously. Bless this club and its activities and its outreach to our own community. May our world be a better place because we've been here. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In all the things we think, say, or do, is it the
Truth, is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Wayne, you introduce our guests, please.
Well, we have Deborah Friedman visiting us from Summit Rotary. Ben Bracken has a guest, Greg Laughlin. And Mike Conrad has a guest.
Yeah, I have a guest, Jacob Lawing. He's a Guilford County boy. He owns Hearing Solutions here in Greensboro on Spring Garden Street. What? So, what'd you say? So give him a warm Rotary welcome.
Jacob, I think we have some prospects for you in here.
There you go.
Is Dale here? I can see Dale slip in. Okay, we'll just have to wait till next week to see if Father Time visited any members this week or next. Okay. Announcements. Surely we have some announcements. Committee chairs, anything that we need to bring before the club? What is that?
It's called Two Bond Singing. It's part of the Folk Festival. The 2017 National Folk Festival's coming to Greensboro. Who got an email on it, a mass email? Oh, okay, a few of them. All right. Yeah, we need to work on that. That came from corporate. But the volunteer coordinator is a friend of mine. And she said, "Hey, would you please share this with your club?" And I said, it's already come down from corporate. So I got the blessing from Matthew, and I'm sharing it with you today. We need some volunteers. 160,000 people come from out of state and other cities to attend it. And it has literally that diverse type of festival. Who's been to the Folk Festival? Awesome. Well, the Devon guys are on the 10th. But anyway, it's got a vast variety, and it's a huge part. It's the last time we're going to have it in the city. They need some volunteers, and we can come as a group. If I can get 3 others, I'm volunteering. They only have 3-hour shifts, very minimal, and there's a bar there. If we really want to hustle, she said, you can hustle at the actual bar. So,
Yeah, let me just piggyback on that. I was able to volunteer last year. It was fun. They put me at a music venue, so I was at the Wrangler stage for about 4 hours, and it was great. Just watching different groups coming through. And you know, with a little crowd control, not a big deal.
What volunteering did you do at the music station?
I made people stay out of the back side of the stage.
Kept them off the stage.
Y'all remember when we used to have bikers games, do the concerts at the Coliseum? No one ever was on the
Now they got
stage.
soft like me.
But anyhow, if y'all will be interested, contact Matthew, let me know, and
I didn't know that was the blessing I was getting.
I'll send out an email if anyone's interested in more detail and a link to their site. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mitty. Well, the Fun Festival's interesting. I've attended, and I was just surprised by the talent and see all kinds of talent. Okay, Buster, how about
Happy dollars! That's what I'm talking about. Now I got one of them math.
This has been a
He's got.
On, I guess it was last Thursday, so I didn't know what the results would be at the prior meeting. But my two little girls did a bake sale for JDRF on their own in the middle of Fountain Manor on the dead-end road with no traffic, and they still raised $370. It was awesome because they were on News 2. I don't know if anybody caught it that afternoon. It was pretty quick, but I just wanted to give a shout out for them.
Good news.
For some reason, Marley being their mother, it doesn't surprise them at all that Marley.
Chris.
This one's for David Crabtree, actually. You guys are headed out Monday, I hear?
Monday.
All right, well, good luck with it and Godspeed on your way down.
Thank you, Chris.
All right.
Anybody else
I got one.
standing distance?
Behind you.
Yeah.
I was real close.
Yeah, go ahead.
My daughter's rising 9th grade at Grimsley. She's going to be on the tennis team, so we're excited for her.
As you all have seen from the emails, I'm on the steering committee for participatory budgeting, and I wanted to invite you all downtown today at 6 o'clock. There's going to be a block party that the city is having. 2 murals are being completed. They were projects that District 3 voted to fund, and an international artist is completing them for our city. So come down and enjoy the block party. There are going to be food trucks and all kinds of stuff. So it's over by the Belmead parking lot.
Too quick. Jenny mentioned he saw my picture on the paper. I do apologize for that. But, recently accepted the market president position for Home Trust Bank. So it's a bank out of Asheville and Raleigh and Charlotte and other parts of the state. But we're opening up a commercial loan office here in Greensboro, and which will evolve into branches and a full service network. So excited about that. It's taken me away from this group, from this meeting a lot this summer, so it's good to be back and kind of back in gear. More exciting than that is my son turns 13 this year, and so for his birthday next month, we're going to head up to Boston. We're big Red Sox fans. We're going to Fenway Park on Saturday, and then Sunday we'll drive down to Foxborough to see the Panthers and Patriots play.
Hope Ride leaves on Monday. Thanks for all of the support and the encouragement, and Chris. Just a shout out for Rotary to begin with. We've got you guys tagged on the unis this year, so we're carrying Rotary and also Carolina Handling Mid and Landmark Realtors with Randy Elliott. So we're really proud to carry those sponsorships this year. Got a killer, just an absolute killer team. So this is going to be an incredible ride. The fundraising has been way over the top. So thank you.
We put our baby, Mary Catherine, on a plane to Florence, Italy yesterday for her semester abroad. And she's at Carolina. She'll be a junior this year. And she got her acceptance into the J school. So little double thing. And then her flight was at 5:30
and they finally put her on the plane at 11 p.m. So,
So you said that's journalism? Is that Jay?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, all right, sorry.
Yeah.
They didn't have letters when I was.
It's official, Mark Tozak, my friend from Canada, who's spoken to this club several times. He's written for the Triad Business Journal before that, News Record. Dear friend, I didn't know he wasn't an American citizen. That's how long he's been here from Canada. But I found out through the grapevine that he was going to be sworn in, naturalization ceremony. I've never been to one. I figured I'll probably never go to another one again in my life. So I drove down to Durham a couple Fridays ago. I was part of 150 people. There were 60 persons from 34 nations that became United States citizens. To see a guy from Guatemala come up on the stage and lead persons from 34 nations in the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States of America was really a moving experience. And so that's it. That's my happy $5.
My 15-year-old is back from her study abroad trip to Africa. So I couldn't be happier she is back on our soil. It's been a little over a week, and she knows what time it is now. And it was a life-changing experience for her, the service and the experience. She said the food was great, and the whole trip. You all know how moving that can be. But I want to give a shout out to Delta. So long story short, I didn't have an original birth certificate with me when we got to Atlanta Airport at check-in. And after the panic of Rosa falling to the floor, how could you ruin this for me? And they were not letting her go, and I thought I was going to have to go. And anyway, this man walks over and he says, "We're just everyone take a deep breath." And you hear these complaints about airlines a lot, but he managed to pull us all in, rein us in, get us under control, have me call somebody, go to my house, get it. We had 50 minutes to get the birth certificate, original copy, to curbside at Delta at Greensboro. Somebody received it there for us, got it on a plane, flew the piece of paper to Atlanta. While we were standing for 4 hours at check-in, they received it. At that point, let us check in, go to International, her gate. He made it there 30 minutes before my flight was going to bring me back here, and they handled her from there. And my plane waited for me to get back on.
Wow.
And they were just, yeah, so go Delta if you're ever in town.
Man.
The reason for your delay?
Abnormal.
It was Delta, and they actually brought Domino's Pizza in. So that's.
Anyway, that's all.
As you've heard me speak in the past, my daughter's a lieutenant in the Navy, Nurse Corps, and she's having really tough duty in San Diego. But now she's going to have tougher duty. She's going to Naples, Italy.
Well, as Grandpappy Lewis always used to say, if at first you don't succeed, find out if the loser gets anything. And it's very appropriate as football pool.
David, how far is your ride next week?
600 miles.
Keep David in your thoughts and prayers. And one other thing, keep Ralph in your thoughts and prayers. He had an unexpected procedure. Had to go to the hospital last night and spend the night in the hospital. And hopefully Ralph, hope you're checking out right now, as a matter of fact. We've had a little procedure on his elbow, so keep him in your thoughts and prayers too. Well, you probably will many of you will recognize our speaker today. In fact, if you look through or read the Triad Business Journal, you'll recognize his column. Dr. Andrew Broad is our monthly contributor on an economics piece in the Triad Business Journal. He taught at UNCG from 1989 to 1999 and then joined the Center for Business and Economic Research when it was established in 1999. He is technically retired from the university, but still manages to teach a course now and then. In fact, he'll be teaching a course this fall. He is an expert witness and a litigation consultant on the side, and also working in conjunction with the group out of UNC Charlotte to help evaluate and improve the state's chief primary economic model for evaluating the effectiveness of economic incentives. He is married, has 3 children and 3 boys, and is the vice president of the Greensboro Jewish Federation. Please give a warm Rotary welcome to Dr. Andrew Dahl.
Well, good morning.
Morning.
I bring this because I used to bring speeches on my phone, and the type's just too small. So instead of printing something off, I'll just have this here. My password is something. I have to say I'm very impressed, Chip. I write those comments, and I appreciate the way you read them, except you didn't read them. You memorized them. That's really quite good. Another comment, my parents met at J School. So, and finally, I'll note that I don't often give shout-outs, but my mother-in-law, Deborah Friedman, Dr. Deborah Friedman, is here. I hope you understand that she's a compassionate and giving person. When she moved to Greensboro, she asked permission to move about 5 blocks from me. Yes, my mother-in-law. 5 blocks from me. And she asked permission, and I thought that was really a very kind thing. And after we worked out a financial settlement, it was just fine. So, good to see you, Deborah. I've been asked to talk about the triad economy, and I promise I'll do so, except that you really can't do that anymore without giving at least a little nod to what's going on nationally. The Greensboro and the triad economy used to be more different than the national economy. Now we're much more a microcosm of the national economy than we were, say, 20, certainly 30 or 40 years ago. And a lot of it has to do with the shrinking of the manufacturing base. We used to be, as I say, when times were good nationally, they were better here. And when they were bad nationally, they were worse here. Now we're more in lockstep, except, well, this will be a slightly depressing talk, I just need you to know. After a weekend in which we saw the specter of white supremacy rearing its head over the United States, maybe you were thinking, let's have a friendly little talk about economics. It's not going to be so good. But nationally, it's not so bad. We're still in the middle of an expansion. It is a slightly weakening expansion. I don't know if we've been doing this or this, but whatever we've been doing, it's beginning to reach the top. And it's worth noting that the longest expansion we've ever seen so far has been 10 years, 120 months, 10 years on the nose. And this expansion right now is 8 years old. So it's getting to be elderly. It's getting to the point where things start tipping over. We're more susceptible to certain shocks. And I think we're seeing that. Unemployment is still low. It's quite low. We're not as clear about what that means as we used to. All of the labor market measures are looking good. Labor force participation is the exception. It's the rate at which people choose to be in the labor force is greater than it was at the depths of the recession. And even when you correct for demographics, a lot of people are retiring and so on. It's still the case that it's improved, but it's still not as good as it was back during the last expansion, the expansion that went from 2001 through 2007. But people will say that it's discouraged workers and so on. It's just not true. Some people talk about the real unemployment rate. Well, it's not the real one. We just have different ones. We have the one that's reported called U3, because it's supposed to roll off the tongue, and the one that is the quote-unquote real, to some people, unemployment rate, U6, is the one that includes discouraged workers. It includes people who are working part-time jobs but would rather have full-time jobs. When you look at that one, it's about where it always has been. It's about double the rate. U3, the one that's reported in the newspaper, is 4.3%. And sure enough, the U6 is around 8.5%. And it's sort of always double. One goes up and U6 is double it. It goes up as well. So the numbers don't look that bad from the perspective of unemployment. But as you may know, there are 2 different surveys that tell us about the labor market. One is the household survey, where you survey households and ask them, do you have a job or not? And the problematic thing there are 2 problematic things about that survey. One is the definition of who's unemployed, right? If you're not looking for a job, you're not unemployed because you're not in the labor force. And And I mean, that's a fact that was been mangled a few times by the president, but it's not that at some point we consider you employed, it's just that if you're not looking, you're not unemployed because you're not in the labor force. And so what we're seeing, the biggest issue on that side of the data universe in the labor market is that more people are effectively choosing or feel barred or whatever from even entering the labor force. They're not looking for jobs, they're not discouraged workers, they just, I mean, a discouraged worker is someone who's not looking for work but would take one if you offered. And so it's not even that, it's people just deciding or being forced or whatever simply not to be in the labor force whatsoever. So you have definitional problems on that side of the data universe, but you also have small samples. And as a result, especially when you look at unemployment rates at state and regional levels, they're kind of dubious. I'm not even sure that I believe them sometimes. But on the other side is the establishment survey, and that's what gives us employment levels, number of jobs. And that one has a huge sample, and it's revised monthly according to information from state employment security agencies, like the Division of Employment Security here in North Carolina. And so it is rock solid, statistically speaking. It doesn't have definitional problems, and it's my go-to economic indicator. Some people will look at gross domestic product or income, but those things are susceptible to distributional issues. I mean, you could have a lot of income growth, but if it's only the rich people, well, it doesn't tell you the same thing that another indicator might. Jobs, well, it's not perfect either because it doesn't tell you what the wages are. But if I'm going to look at one indicator, that's the one I look at. And until one figure that we've been told about recently is that since Trump's inauguration, or since January until now, the markets, we've added about 1.07 million jobs in the first half of 2017, a million jobs. And it sounds really good. And we've been told to believe that it's really good. But, in context, it's actually a bit of a slowing down. Because in the last 6 years of the previous administration, there were 12 such half-year periods. And in 11 of those 12 half-year periods, we had job growth bigger than we had in the first half of this year. So if anything, on average, this first half of the year is a significantly slower job growth. Wage growth, though, but we're still growing, and that's the thing. We're still in an expansion. Wage growth is pretty weak by historical standards. There are other measures. One that's been trumpeted a lot, is the stock market. And even then, it's not quite as glorious as it sounds. Since January, since the day of Trump's inauguration, the S&P 500 has been rising at an annual rate of over 15%, 15.6%. And that's great. I mean, we would all want to have 15% rate of return every year. But if you look at, from where the market hit bottom in early 2009 until Trump's inauguration, it rose at an annual rate of 16.5%. Now, it's not a perfect comparison because we know that when the market hits bottom, you see a lot of growth. It's not, some of that growth is just the rapid growth from economic recovery that, doesn't necessarily have to be blamed or credited to anyone. But the point is that, things are not speeding up this year since that guy took office. But it's not necessarily his fault. If anything, if we hit a recession soon, I'm going to blame it on the Fed. Because the Fed seems to have this idea that we need to raise interest rates because we need to fight inflation. Except when you look around in the economic statistics, there's no inflation. If you look at the forward-looking measures of future inflation, it's not there. When you survey market participants about their expectations of future inflation, it's not there. When you look at current measures, it's not there. It's just not there. And yet they're fighting it. And raising interest rates at a time when there's no inflation, when the economy is, it's certainly not bad, but there's something wrong. Something's not connecting. And so if we have a recession soon, I'm not going to blame Trump so much as I'll point my finger at the Fed. But the thing is, the odds are, as I said, because of the length of recessions, the odds are there will be a recession under Trump's watch. Assuming he makes it to 2020. Because, the 10-year mark is going to be mid-2019. You know, so even if this recession, this expansion, there's a difference, even if this expansion makes it as long as the longest one we've ever seen, it'll still happen sometime during this 4-year term. That's not to say that we won't see a longer one, because we have a trend recently of long, rather weak expansions. You know, the one in the 1990s was long and strong. Sounds like an ad for an adult movie. And 2001 through 2007 was long and weak. And the one we're in right now is certainly long and weak as well. So, you know, the record could be broken. But, you know, we need to acknowledge that there's a good chance that we're going to be seeing expansion, or seeing recession, there's a difference, seeing recession soon. And that's the context that gives me a little pause when I start telling you about the triad economy. You know, the Greek story about Diogenes, who went looking all over, you know, holding a lantern, looking for an honest man. Well, the definition of an economist is someone who goes around looking for people to depress. That's kind of my story today when we talk about the triad economy. Again, the single most important economic indicator to me is jobs, number of jobs. It captures more of what's going on than any other single indicator. It doesn't tell us everything, but it's the best single indicator. And it's one that I have to rely on because, well, someone asked me about Don Judd before the talk. Don passed away a couple of years ago. And was he a member? He was a Kiwanis member. I knew he wasn't in this club, but, and so his Triad Business Index is now dormant. I'm hoping it'll come back. But it was good because it gave us that kind of, you know, one number that kind of summarized a bunch of different things about the triad economy. We don't have that now, at least for right now, so jobs. And so I took a look at these numbers in my last Business Journal column, and I have to say the results were eye-opening for me. What I did is I looked at job growth from February 2008, a little bit after the recession started, but that was when employment in North Carolina hit its peak, its previous peak. And I looked at growth since then. Now, of course, what happened after that was things went way down and then came up. So the question is, have areas recovered the jobs they lost during the Great Recession? And for the state of North Carolina, we are now 5.6% above that. We have recovered the jobs lost in the Great Recession as a state. Nationally, it's 5.8%. So we are almost keeping up with the national economy. If you look at various measures, you know, we're tracking the national economy right now as a state. I wouldn't call that a Carolina comeback. I'd call that keeping up with the average, and that's good. But when you look at North Carolina, average, well, it reminds you of my daddy's comment about the guy with his head in the oven and his feet in the freezer. On average, he was fine. North Carolina, on average, we're fine. We're pretty good. But when you look at the metro areas in North Carolina, and that's what I did in my last column, we have seasonally adjusted data on 14 of the 15 metros. Sorry, New Bern, we don't mind missing you. And of those 14 metros, as I say, a lot of variation, and I grouped them. And I won't just throw numbers at you, but I grouped them into high flyers, moderate growth, just getting by, and stuck in reverse. Now I ask you, Greensboro economy, many of you, most of you are in touch with what's going on here. Where do you think we go? Do you think we belong with the high flyers? Nope. Charlotte and Raleigh and Durham, Chapel Hill? Nope. Well, no. Those guys have growth rates of from 11 to 17%. You know, well above the state and national average. They're doing very well. They have research universities and finance and state government and consulting and the research triangle and so on. There's a lot of high growth, high margin, knowledge-intensive activity going on there, and that's where growth is these days. All right, well, moderate growth. Cities, metros like Asheville, Wilmington, Jacksonville, do you think we might be in there? Moderate growth is 5, at least in my grouping, these things grouped very nicely, 5 to up to around 7.5%. At least at the top end, they're above the state average, but not by much, moderate growth. And Jacksonville is a little bit below the average. And my reaction to those, Asheville, Wilmington, Jacksonville, is, well, it's good to be on the beach or in the mountains, you know. Tourism is a significant buoy to these regional economies. There are some universities, there's also retirement communities, a significant growth area in a lot of regions these days. Moderate growth, so we're not there, we're not in high flyers, we're not in moderate growth. How about just getting by? It's just a little bit above zero. No, we're not there either. I'd like to tell you that we're there, but we're not even there. There we have Greenville and Fayetteville. You know, it's hot out there on the coastal plain. It's just, you don't really want to move much, let alone grow an economy, I guess. At 1.7, 1.1%, but also Burlington, I threw that in there. Didn't really know where to put Burlington. In fact, that's actually the story of Burlington. Burlington has its own metro area. Alamance County, by itself, is its own metro area. Why? Why would you do that? I mean, perfectly nice town, but why would you do that? And it's because they define these things by commuting patterns. And Burlington is stuck in the middle. It didn't make sense to tie it to the triangle because it has as much commuting to the triad as it does, you know, west as it does east. So it didn't make sense to put it either with the triad or the triangle, so they just stuck it out by itself. Anyway, Burlington is at 0. Burlington is just getting by. It has just barely regained the jobs it lost. So sad to say, we are stuck in reverse. Winston-Salem is at negative 0.3%. It's almost back to where it was before the recession started. And that's the 5-county Winston-Salem metro area that includes Davidson, Davie, etc. Greensboro High Point, negative 2.1%. We're still 2% below where we were when the recession started. We still haven't regained the jobs. We're still lower than we were in terms of job creation. Hickory, negative 5%. Goldsboro, negative 8%. Rocky Mount, negative 13%. We're in the same group as Rocky Mount. And when you look at this, actually, when you look at rural counties, for the longest time, I would have sat here before I actually looked at data, which is note to self, look at data. I'm going to type this in, look at data. I would have said that there were 3 economic regions in North Carolina. They're Charlotte and Raleigh. You know, they're just head and shoulders above anything else that we've pretty much ever experienced in this state. Incredible draws for young talent, draws for knowledge-intensive workers, draws for young people. They're just different. And you know, if city economic development officials were sitting here, they'd be disappointed and depressed to hear that, but it's just true. 40 years ago, we had a chance, maybe, to be Charlotte, but we're not. The various things happened, we're not there. I mean, I don't know where we are, but we're not there. But there was Charlotte, and then that was tier 1, and then tier 3 at the bottom. The bottom tier was rural counties, having lost manufacturing, really depending on agriculture and so on, just, you know, in very poor economic shape for the most part. And I saw Greensboro and Winston-Salem, and maybe a few other metros as being kind of in the middle there, between rural counties, sort of mediocre, not terrible, not wonderful, because there are, you know, examples of dynamic, you know, economic vitality here in the Triad region. It's just that when you add it all up, you know, the negatives outweigh the positives. See, this is fun, right? You're having fun. And looking at these data made me realize that's not quite right, at least as it characterizes the Triad. Again, the 3 Triad metro areas. Burlington is at 0. It's regained the jobs it lost, but no more. Winston-Salem and Greensboro High Point were both negative relative to where we were at the start of the recession. We're actually more like, by this measure, and again, I think it's the most important single measure, by this measure, we're more like rural North Carolina than we're like Charlotte and Raleigh, because when you look at the rural counties that aren't in metro areas, they're something like negative 4%. They're still 4% below where they were at the start of the recession. Well, Greensboro High Point at negative 2, we're more like that than we are like Raleigh at plus 17. You know, so it's a night and day difference, and it's you know, as depressing as all get at.
Can you extrapolate any data for what kind of jobs are coming back, and if we're still lagging where we were, all the jobs that we've added since that point? Can you talk a little bit?
I never extrapolate.
Or can you give us some indication on, are we just adding jobs to Starbucks, or are we adding?
Well, the problem is on net. The question is what jobs, what kind of jobs are we adding? The problem is on net, we're not adding jobs. We're not adding jobs fast enough to recover from where we were. Now, you know, the thing is, there's good news every day. Just yesterday in the Business Journal, there was an announcement of a company, Fibertex. It's a new location. It's going to be in Randolph County. I think it's going to take over the Goodyear property there near Asheboro. And Fibertex is, they make the fabric, the non-woven fabric that goes inside disposable diapers, so, you know, glamour industry. But nevertheless, you know, business is business, jobs are jobs. And, but the thing is, when you looked at manufacturing announcements like this from even just 20 years ago, there were a number of 1,000 job announcements. You know, manufacturing plants used to say, you know, Dell wasn't here for long, but they said, yeah, we're going to bring in 1,500 jobs, and yeah, they brought in 1,200 for a bit. But, you know, the Fibertex thing is 145 jobs. Well, you know, we're happy to get that, but this is what passes as good news. Manufacturing jobs were not outsourced to China, which is why, you know, Trump's pledge to bring those jobs back isn't going to work, because that's not where they went. They didn't go to China. They went into that machine. By far and away, manufacturing jobs have been replaced by automation, capital substitution. So 145 jobs is actually pretty big these days. I see a lot of these announcements, and they're 50, 60 jobs, and we're paying millions of dollars to get those 60 jobs. So these, and while it's true that as someone who does economic impact analysis a lot, it's true that these manufacturing plants have a lot of spillovers. They generally connect with lots of other suppliers and vendors, but it's still, you know, this is a drop in the bucket, and this is the kind of thing that we see. So what kind of jobs are we adding? You know, wages, we don't have wage data. That's the problem. We don't have wage data at the Triad or the Guilford County level. But, you know, what we know about our area is the following. We have, in fact, this is the single most important fact about our local area. We have a relatively poorly trained and educated workforce. When you look at measures of educational attainment, we can have that, we do have that from census data. We compare well to rural counties, well, we should, but we don't compare well to other metro areas, which is why sometimes I talk about skills clusters rather than industry clusters. It's not what industries you have, it's what kind of skilled workers you have. And my two favorite examples are San Diego and Rochester, New York. Has anyone ever seen the movie Falling Down with Michael Douglas? God, I love that movie. But it's about a guy who is dislocated, shall we say, during the aeronautics industry's bust in Southern California in the early 1990s, late 80s, early 90s. And that industry pretty much went away in Southern California. But San Diego is not on the hard times now. It's a huge biotech cluster, and a lot of these techs, I'm not saying that the aeronautics PhDs suddenly turned around and became life sciences PhDs, they moved to somewhere else. But the bulk of the workforce, because it had skills, it had transferable skills. Skills means transferable skills. And so the lab techs in one area could become lab techs in another area. And as a result, San Diego has this extremely low unemployment rate. Things are going on. Rochester, New York has seen the demise of a number of industries. You remember when people used to take well, people in this room, you're like me. You remember when people took photos and would get film developed. There's a whole industry based on film. And of course, that's pretty much gone. That and similar industries were at the heart of Rochester, New York's industry community. And they're gone. But Rochester's doing quite well because it had a lot of skilled workers. We don't have skilled workers. It's meant that, you know, what happened? Why are we at negative 2%? Because we got hit by this double whammy, maybe triple whammy. Because we had this there's been this long-standing, decades-long evolution away from manufacturing. And by the way, North Carolina used to be the most manufacturing-intensive state in the country. If you measured it by jobs in manufacturing industries relative to total employment, we were the most manufacturing state in the country, and the Triad was the most manufacturing region in the state, in the most manufacturing-intensive state. It's been a big deal. We had a lot of eggs in that one basket, but that basket said textiles and apparel. And even though textiles became automated, apparel was the one industry. By the way, I've looked at these data extensively at different points in time, and apparel manufacturing stands out as the one. In all these other industries, you find employment going down, but production rising. But in apparel, they're both going down. And that's the one industry in which the Trump story or the other story, popular story about offshoring is really true. that industry never found a way to harness labor-saving technologies. And as a result, it had to be on the lookout for cheap wages. You know, we live by the cheap wage. That's how we attracted those industries 100 years ago from New England and so on. Died by the cheap wage. Those industries left in search of cheaper wages. Textiles, they didn't need to search for cheaper wages because they were automating, but they went where their customers were. So a lot of textile and fabric mills went elsewhere as well. So we had we're near the end? Oh, we're at the end?
We're getting close, so I want you to finish that thought up, because
Can I
I think
finish
there are
my
a couple
sentence?
questions that people would like to ask.
I'll finish my sentence. I'm not really sure what that sentence, how it was going to end. I never really know how they're going to end until I get there. Well, suffice it to say, you know, if you're looking forward, you know, the big problem, the triple whammy was a long-standing evolution away from manufacturing, combined with a horrible, horrible recession, combined with the fact that we don't have a well-trained or highly educated workforce on the whole. Those three things, you know, put together is why we're still at a point where we still have not regained the jobs we lost at the beginning or during the Great Recession. What do we do? I don't bloody know. I mean, I really don't know.
STEM classes.
Maybe that can be, well, but you know, that's a good question because it's always the right, what do you do? Well, that's fine, great information. Thanks, Andy. Now what do we do? And you know, the problem is that the use of targeted incentives is a popular tool. It's controversial, but you know, it just doesn't get you that much. 145 jobs, great, good job, guys. So that's, you know, that's probably, it needs to be part of the toolkit, but it's not a panacea. It's not the solution.